As fall championships wrap up and winter sports kick into gear, MHSAA Executive Director Mark Ewell joins us on Season 10 of the MASSP podcast to talk about what it takes to manage overlapping seasons, new sports like girls field hockey and boys volleyball, and why February might just be the toughest month of the year for athletic directors. We also dig into the state of sportsmanship, the role of student leaders in shaping culture, and what decades of data tell us about participation fees and access to athletics. If you're a school leader, coach, or parent who wants a behind-the-scenes look at how Michigan high school sports really run and what challenges are on the horizon, this is an episode you won't want to miss, so check it out. So enjoy your ride to or from school, your run on the treadmill, or however you like to listen, because another MASSP podcast episode starts now. All right, so Season 10 is back, and we have another podcast episode for MASSP, joined by someone who is no stranger to the MASSP podcast, Mark Ewell, who is the Executive Director of MHSAA. So, Mark, thanks so much for finding time. I always feel bad asking you to come and talk to us and give us updates, depending on where we are at that time of the year. A lot of stuff still going on for fall sports, and winter sports already gearing up. So thank you for being here. Appreciate your time.
Anytime, Ryan. Good to be with you.
So knowing that it is that time and, fall is blending into winter here, I'm just curious to know kind of what's that like for you all behind the scenes when you have two different sports kind of going on, wrapping up, starting. Just how are things going, and what's that craziness look like for you all at MHSAA?
Busy time of the year for our staff, certainly. We've got 5 of our fall championships are done. So tennis and golf always reach the finish line first. Our newest sport is finished up, girls field hockey. So congratulations to Ann Arbor Pioneer being our first ever girls field hockey champions. The first Saturday in November is always cross country and boys soccer. So those championships have both finished up, and the 3 left to go are girls volleyball, girls swimming and diving, and then obviously football. And those will finish up here over the last 3 weekends of November. And as you said, Ryan, winter sports practices are either have started or are just around the corner. So the way we look at it, it's job security. Lots of folks need us right now, which is a good thing, but an exciting time of the year. I will say, a challenge that we do have to kind of navigate every 6 years is when Halloween falls on the opening night of our football playoffs. When it comes to revenue, when it comes to, revenue, 76% of being a private not-for-profit association, 76% of our revenue comes from ticket sales. And now with everything being online, we're able to get almost real-time data. And when Thanksgiving falls on the opening Friday night, which is one of our bigger financial nights of the year, that's tough scheduling. So we're going to have some internal conversations about the next time it'll happen is in 2031, and in God willing, we'll all still be here and all still be worrying about that issue. But it obviously Thanksgiving falls on Halloween falls on a different day every year, and again, it's just as that calendar rolls over. Halloween's a big deal right now, and I guess I was a little surprised by it, just how big of a deal it was when lots of families it looked like chose to trick or treat rather than going to the playoff game last Friday night.
Understandable. I didn't even, when it happened, I go, ooh, I was interested, but unfortunately our home team didn't make it that far. So I guess it wasn't as much of a concern. Had our local football team qualified and made it. Real quick, in regard to the inaugural season for girls, is it field hockey?
Yep, in the fall, yep.
What are you anticipating for next fall? Do you think that will continue to grow now that it's officially been, had their first official postseason? We got to declare a champion. Do you foresee that happening?
That's a hope. I'm not sure how realistic that is. Really, the new sport, we took on two new sports for this school year, boys volleyball being the one that we really thought we would have some fairly rapid growth. Volleyball is fairly easy to grow because every high school that has girls volleyball in the fall has the infrastructure, facilities, and equipment already set up if they want to get into boys in the spring. You've already got poles and volleyballs and a coaching staff. We already register officials in volleyball. And, plus to have a volleyball team, you don't need 40 kids on your roster. You really need about a dozen,
Yep.
So that you can at least practice 6-on-6 each day. But really, I think it's a fairly light lift for schools that want to add boys volleyball. And we anticipate we'll really see some pretty rapid growth fairly quickly in that. Just from a Title IX standpoint, we also needed to find a girls' sport to add at that same time. And so that's really how girls field hockey came into the mix. They've been playing kind of organized by the Coaches Association for a lot of years. We don't see a lot of schools saying, hey, we need to add girls field hockey. Our schools primarily in the two metro areas, certainly Detroit, a little bit in West Michigan, continue to play it. So we're hopefully seeing some modest growth in girls field hockey, but really it was more of kind of making sure the entire puzzle fit in terms of what our offerings were.
That makes sense. All right. So as we kind of close the door on fall sports and we're looking ahead to the winter season, any updates, changes, points of emphasis that you want, principals, ADs, schools to be aware of, or would you say things are kind of pretty status quo coming up this winter season?
I think fairly status quo. Like there's still a part of this, that for all of the uncertainty and flexibility we all had to show in the pandemic. I think there's an appetite for having some status quo for not a lot of new initiatives, new programs. It will only affect 16 of our school communities, but I do think a quick explanation about our football finals again this year. So we have two really good partnerships in our relationship with the Lions in Ford Field, as well as with Michigan State University. Michigan State hosts a lot of our stuff, centrally located right here in East Lansing. Well, of course, Michigan State football is struggling right now. And, they wanted to play there. And by the way, we've been a little bit unlucky. Michigan State has played at home, just the way the new Big Ten schedule has fallen. They have played at home on Thanksgiving weekend for their last home football game now for 3 years in a row. Well, this year, their game with Maryland, there were some concerns about, Spartan Stadium. And, you get to that last weekend in November and ice and snow. And
Yep.
So they decided to take their game to Ford Field. And unlike 2 years ago, when they played Penn State at Ford Field on Friday night of Thanksgiving weekend, this year it's on Saturday. So it forced us. Now we're playing our finals on split days. Four divisions are playing on the traditional Friday date. Because of Michigan State, Maryland, we're taking Saturday off, and then we'll come back and play our last four games on that Sunday. It's a big football weekend in Detroit, and the Lions and Packers play on Thursday. We're on Friday, Michigan State, Maryland on Saturday. And so certainly having to use a Sunday is not ideal. It's not something that we wanted to do. Really when we asked our football community, though, hey, do we want to go with split days of Friday, Sunday, less than ideal, or we could stay on our traditional Friday, Saturday schedule, but we'd be playing outdoors somewhere, whether that would have been at Central Michigan or Eastern Michigan or Western, whatever the case may be. So sometimes when you have good relationships, you need to, it's like any good relationship. There needs to be some give and take. There needs to be some compromise at times. And certainly by us moving off of Saturday and accommodating the Spartans, we've done that. A lot of people do kind of make our weekend finals in Detroit a pilgrimage to where they'll come and they'll watch all 8 games and they'll stay overnight. Well, with us having the day off in between, that makes it much tougher for folks that really have liked to do that over the years. But like I said, sometimes to keep the harmony in the relationship, you've got to be willing to compromise. And So again, scheduling events on Sunday is far less than ideal for us, but when given the alternatives of that versus going outdoors and rolling the dice with weather
Yeah.
and all of those things, Friday, Sunday was the best option after that conversation.
And I think hopefully people, when they, sometimes I think they just see the result of like, here's the decision, right? And they don't think about the context and all the thought that went into as you are explaining, right? So I think just listening to you explain it, I'd like to think most people would go, oh, yeah, I can understand that. I can see that now. That makes sense versus when they just react to it's 2 days or it's split days, right?
It's a Sunday, and of course, these would be the same people, though, that if we would have said, okay, for this year, we're going to go outdoors, and when the weather is bad on Friday, this would be the same keyboard warrior that would
Yep.
take to
Yep.
Facebook and,
Yeah,
how
absolutely.
did we not come up with some way to where we could still be at Ford Field? So,
Right.
you're, with all of your listeners and viewers, many times in leadership, you're darned if you do and you're darned if you don't, and that's kind of how our football scenario was this year.
Understandable. So, thanks for kind of laying that out. So, I want to keep on the winter season here a little bit. I saw a great infographic MHSAA put out the other day, and it just really made you think about the scale of all of the contests going on. And I'm going to read off a couple of the stats that I saw. So, over this winter season, which I think is projected to be 146 days or something like that, there's 16,000 head-to-head matchups. 4,000 teams will be involved. There's going to be 1,500 postseason games, 38 champions crowned. Um, so when you think about those numbers, I guess number one, I'm just curious, like, does that seem pretty in line with maybe the other seasons, spring season, which I always think about spring being really crazy with everything going on outdoors. And then secondly, does your team ever get a chance to sit back and go, wow, we get a lot done in a short amount of time? Or maybe you ask yourself, man, we're kind of crazy to try and get this all done in a short amount of time.
Sure. We pride ourselves on being kind of a lean, mean fighting machine. We have 25 total employees. That's from a executive director all the way down to a part-time custodian. So our reach, the number of kids that participate in high school sport each and every year is right around a 250,000 kids. Now that is counting multi-sport athletes, sometimes 2 and 3 times.
No.
But the number of kids that we serve year after year in Michigan, just at the high school level, that's not even talking about our member middle schools and the kids there, but it's about 250,000 kids. And certainly the fall and the winter are the high volume sports. And I do think you ask any administrator, what's the toughest season? Without question, it's the winter. Because other than downhill ski, we're all indoors. And you can almost see the number of incident and ejection reports. Once the calendar hits February, those numbers always increase. I often call February the anti-Disneyland because February is the most unhappy place on earth.
Yep.
You're getting into the dog days of the winter season. I think everybody is starting, to really just can't wait to get outdoors, can't wait to get to spring break. So for any new administrator in what we tell our new ADs, if you can survive the winter, you can do just about anything. Because again, the events don't stop. It's basketball one night and it's wrestling the next night. And for those schools that have swim and ice hockey, you're managing some of those games. And of course, those are at non-school facilities. So I have to have coverage at the ice rink and maybe our pool isn't at the high school, it's down the street at the middle school, or it's a community aquatic center. So there's just an awful lot to juggle in the winter. But no, when you look at the sheer numbers of games, events, competition, you then do the math of the number of coaches that are involved. We have 10,000 registered officials, referees, umpires, judges, that obviously these things can't happen without them either. You have to at least take a minute here and there to step back and say, man, we are pulling this off, affecting hundreds of thousands of kids, tens of thousands of adults, in terms of those that serve in leadership positions. And again, all of this is coordinated by the little engine that could, just the 25 of us that come in each day and call Ramblewood Drive here in East Lansing home. So A lot more to do and always make it more efficient. We're always looking how we can make things better, but the reach that we have in the state of Michigan for young people, it's really pretty unique.
Absolutely. Speaking of trying to make things better, I know we've talked, from the lens of MHSAA and MASSP, really trying to see what we can do about, sportsmanship. And that's been a focus for a few years now, right? And not just the players, but coaches, spectators, parents, because that impacts athletic directors, it impacts the coach, it impacts the principal or the assistant principal when those issues arise, especially if you think about winter season indoors in a building, and sometimes the gyms are set up where they're just right on top, right? The
Yep.
crowd's on top. And so I know that you guys have a sportsmanship summit, and I'm just really not familiar with it. So I'm just was hoping that you could kind of describe kind of what is that summit, what does it do to hopefully address some of those, sportsmanship issues, and kind of what are some things that have come out of that summit that have been a positive impact, have had a positive.
We're recording this the first week of November. Yesterday, on Monday, November the 3rd, we had our first of 4 regional sportsmanship summits that Andy Frushauer of our staff leads, and we use our 16 students who are part of our student advisory committee. So our 16 kids, we basically take 4 of those student leaders for each of our 4 summits, and they're kind of our leaders for the day, to where we do some full group instruction. And the key is we're really trying to teach, train, and empower student leaders at each of our schools. So now when we get into winter, those student leaders, okay, what should our student section look like at the basketball game or at the hockey game? What are some things that we really want to focus on and enforce about ways to positively support our team without trying to demean and really do some things that are in kind of the gray area of sportsmanship toward the others. So lots of breakouts. Everybody, and we get the evaluations from kids that attend. It's really a worthwhile day. So tomorrow, ours is in the Troy area, so kind of our Metro Detroit one, and then we'll have 2 up north next week, and those happen each and every year because sportsmanship issues will never go away. The ironic thing, Ryan, is of the student leaders that come to our sportsmanship summits, it's almost we're preaching to the choir, because we have some phenomenal kids who are kind of those leaders back at their schools. And truth be told, many of our issues really aren't student related. So many times it's the adults. Our biggest issues aren't with student cheering sections. It's with that adult who, after a game, is frustrated with their kid's coach and now wants to go up and confront the coach, 2 minutes after the end of the game. Or it's that adult who, for whatever reason, during the game didn't think the officiating was very good. Yep. And now I want to go chasing those referees down the hallway and pound on the locker room door. The reality is that our biggest issues when it comes to sportsmanship right now deal with adults. We do a survey every 3 years of our former officials. So officials that have been registered with us and for whatever reason, they don't want to continue. Well, we reach out and say, okay, why did you leave? And far and away, the top 2 reasons, which make us feel good, it's outside of our control. It's a change in their family status. So we have lots of folks who, will officiate in college. Great way to make some extra money. I'm now in my mid to late 20s, get married, we have kids. I simply don't have the time. So a change in my family or my career status, that's really outside of our control. The second reason is that folks just simply age out. When folks hit that, that whether it be 65 or 70 or 75, that my time as a basketball referee, it comes to an end. As we say in athletics, that, father time continues to be undefeated. Yeah. So those are always the top 2 reasons. And then there's a little bit of a gap, but reasons 3 and 4 by a long shot, and this is the thing that really is our fuel, is the reason that officials get out. Reason number 3 is the way that they're treated by adult spectators. And then followed closely behind that, it's the way that they're treated by coaches. So how ironic that in this world of educational sports where it really should be about the kids, the reason that we have officials leaving before they're probably ready or want to. It's the way that adults are treating other adults. And I get it, from a coaching standpoint, there is more on the line at the varsity level. But Ryan, we deal with issues every single season of that JV coach or that freshman coach or even the seventh and eighth grade coach who just, wants to make the entire game about the officiating. What you try and tell parents at that seventh or eighth grade basketball game is, Tom Izzo was not out in the hallway giving out scholarships. The results of the eighth grade B game are not going to be on Sports Center tonight. And you would hope that the adults involved would have a little bit of perspective, because the reality is a lot of time at the junior high or even freshman level, it's our least experienced officials with our least experienced coaches. And by the way, the level of play, these are kids who are still learning and figuring things out as well. And sometimes, parents show up to those lower level games thinking it's the seventh game of the NBA finals. And that's where we really have to kind of pump the brakes. So the reason though we're continuing to pour into our student leaders is, we're hoping to see a little bit of a bump in sportsmanship from that. But yet our current student leaders today are also going to be our next generation of high school parents.
Absolutely.
In 15, 20, 25 years down the road. And I think for us to plant some of those seeds about the proper perspective and, doing things the right way, it's a valuable message for us to continue to talk about year after year. And the last thing I'll say in my old guy moment of the answer is social media does not help us here. The issues that we do have with kids, you see it at the pro and the college level, especially at the college level, is, okay, let's try and find this somewhat bizarre or kind of crazy behavior. Well, this is making the rounds on social media. Well, now it becomes a game of kind of Johnny Topper. Well, we need to do something at our school and so I think sometimes, the way that, right now you watch a college football game and the visiting team scores almost immediately, instead of celebrating with my teammates or being excited that we scored. But when we're on the road, the first thing I have to do is I got to put my hand up by my helmet or my finger up, to almost now I'm going to mock the home crowd. First thing I do. And that trickles down. That's the stuff you see on social media. And
but celebrated.
The sportsmanship space will have a job for life, because just as, we're now 101 years old. And by the way, when you read some historical accounts of when we got started back in the 1920s, you'll see occasional article about, back then it was kill the umpire. That was what people would say at baseball. That, again, it was just kind of the norm of society at the time. But you can see things of 100 years ago that sportsmanship was a area of focus. And, we've evolved in a lot of ways. But unfortunately, whenever you're keeping score and you've got a competitive atmosphere, you're going to have some of those challenges. And that's a daily exercise for us each and every day.
And I think from a leadership lens for the principals that are there supervising, athletic directors, a lot of it still just comes down to what are you going to accept or tolerate as behavior, and how are you going to make sure that there is a standard that's being upheld and you hold people accountable for their actions, And so I think sometimes, especially sometimes, I think we put some people in a hard spot as I tend to see sometimes athletic directors are getting younger and younger and younger, and we've got some pretty young people that are going to be going against somebody, have to deal with a spectator twice their age or somebody that's well known in the community, and those are just an extra layer of a challenge that you got to figure out how to deal with and handle.
And I think, during COVID, especially administrators, sport, that's just another fight, after I've been fighting with people about masks and all of the other things that were connected to the school day that we were trying to navigate. And again, it's probably easier to have that conversation with the 16-year-old junior in the stands than it is with that kid's uncle or parent or even grandparent that shows up. And, they figured they paid their $5 and, they can give, coaches and officials a piece of their mind.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for touching on that. And I'm sure we'll continue to talk about it in future updates. But I know I got to get you out of here soon. So one last thing I wanted to get your input on has to do with participation fees. So I read recently, I know at least coming out of the pandemic, the participation fees have been pretty flat, or they've either gone down, either the amount of schools that have been requiring them or the amount kids are paying. And I think you guys have been tracking this for maybe 20 years or so. So I'm just curious, um, really, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I'm sure there's one side that says, it's important for kids to have, skin in the game, so to speak, so they're going to be accountable and they're going to put in good effort. But at the same time, knowing that it very well could be a barrier for others. And so I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on participation fees, and what has the data been kind of telling you all?
So I think, 20 years ago that this became really a hot topic. The darkest economic times, I'm 51, the toughest economic times, and lifelong Michigan resident, were in the late 2000s. And so state was in tough shape, schools were in tough shape. That was really the time that, was the way that school districts tried to really make their budget, the ends meet. Is I think a lot of the benefits were under attack, right? Retirement, the old MIP programs and some of those defined benefit programs changed. That was also a time where a lot of educators saw that, okay, now I'm having to pay for a portion of my insurance. Well, because of those really tough times in the late 2000s, that's when a lot of our districts also had to impose a pay to participate fee. Some districts would call that a transportation fee. Some districts, because you don't want to call it, a pay to play, because, well, hey, I paid my money and therefore I should be starting at quarterback or the point guard a little bit too. So I think in the short term, it did help a lot of districts. Typically, a school's athletic department budget of the total school budget is generally about 2 to 3%. So I really think that I think athletics are the best deal in schools. That the amount of money that districts spend vis-a-vis the amount of kids that are part of the program that are impacted by it, I still think that school sports are the best value out there. Well, those participation fees could help some athletic departments cover some basic expenses. And that's the way that it was. And I think that's also become fairly accepted over the years, because now we have a whole generation of kids that they've spent their whole time growing up playing sports in non-school and club and travel. Parents are used to writing the check. That, having to pay a fee to be able to play is not a foreign concept today, to where 30, 40 years ago that was almost unheard of. Some districts, though, have become very smart about this, because, okay, if our pay to participate fees were bringing in $50,000, and that was, helping fill a little bit of a gap in our budget. Well, we've had some superintendents that said, wait a minute, if our basic foundation allowance for every student in our district is, right, let's just use a ballpark number, is just under $10,000. Well, if we now go out and market our district to students that, hey, you come to our district and become a student at the high school level, we charge no pay to participate fees. Well, if you now get 5 kids, let's say, hey, instead of going to the district over here, we're going to go to the district over there because, we have 6 kids in our family and there's no pay to participate fees. Well, you now attract 5 new students. You've now just covered that $50,000 number. So again, I think some superintendents and boards have kind of taken a look at the bigger picture. I also think, again, because of that, districts have reduced their fees to where, 10, 15 years ago, it may have been $200 a sport, with a family cap. Well, now we're going to reduce those fees. Again, it's another way to market ourselves to try and get more kids into our district. Because in those places, again, that's a lot of angst. If you're charging a really high pay to participate fee, and really you're only filling a small part of that budgetary gap. So I would love to get to a point to where eventually these go away. But like I said, parents are used to my kid playing. Where do I write the check to? And so I think we've actually gotten to a fairly healthy place right now where the fees have either stayed consistent or have even reduced or have gone away, trying to, again, remove as many barriers as possible for kids to play.
I remember years ago, ours transitioned from like a per sport, then it got reduced to it just covers you for the year, whether you do one sport or everything, or and so like I think moves like that make sense. And I know no school wants to turn a kid away from a sport because they can't afford it. And so I know they have things in their back pocket they can do, or just we waive it, or we have a special donor, sponsor, somebody that wants to help out these kids and even things for equipment, right? And basketball shoes. And so there's
Yep.
programs and things available. So I saw that statistic and I thought it was interesting. And so I appreciate how you laid it out. And hopefully some districts are thinking creatively, kind of bigger picture, as you mentioned.
I just one little, this is me probably being a bit of a smart aleck, but we talked about some districts would call it a transportation fee. Well, now with school transportation looking a lot different today than it did, 10, 15, 20 years ago. The issue now, I don't even think it's funding and having buses. It's having drivers that,
Yeah.
the district ever say, hey, we'll waive your transportation fee if mom or dad goes out and gets certified.
Yes.
You can just drive the teams. We've got a handful of athletic directors, Ryan, believe it or not, that went out and got the proper licensure to be able to
Yep.
drive a bus, or even some coaches.
Coaches, yes. I know some coaches who have.
In that, again, we've got the buses available. The coach drives and brings the kids back. And I'll leave it, I guess, with this thought. Been in education now for 30 years. And up until COVID, you would ask school leaders, what's the biggest challenge you have? And the answer, Ryan, was always money. It was always money. Heard that for 20 plus years. And of course, COVID hits, and now in the handful of years since that, you now ask school leaders, what's your biggest problem? Without question, it's never money. It's all about people. And, whether it's coaches or officials or bus drivers or substitute teachers. And I think all of us in leadership positions, that's kind of an overarching thing, that when we have those windshield time drives or rainy days to think about things, I really think that we need to think about how do we keep addressing our people problem, the shortage of folks that want to be involved, that can stay involved. And I think there's lots of layers to those challenges, but transportation is just one little sliver of that. So rambling answer, but
That's a good answer.
something I think about a lot. All of those people, Ryan, one of the things that keeps me awake at night are athletic trainers. The number of schools that continue to provide that program continue to dwindle. It's now an advanced degree, not just a bachelor's degree. I worry that we're going to have athletic trainers to serve our schools 5 to 10 years from now. Worry about that all the time. So
Yeah.
I think if all of us can be creative about the people problem, and if you have ideas, pick up the phone. I'll talk to anybody. But these are some things that we do have to give some future thought to.
Oh, great insight. Thanks, Mark. And as always, I appreciate your time coming up. I know we had you up at EdCon talking to a large group, which we appreciated. And if it's okay, we'll just plan on checking in with you maybe at the end of winter, right before spring gets going, and we'll chat again.
Always great to be with you. Thanks, Ryan.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for listening to the MASSP podcast. Remember, you can listen to this podcast and others anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Just search for MASSP or hit the subscribe button right now.